Lord, I'm on a permanent holiday. I'm going outside to play. I ain't gonna slave away. Not for no corporate Babylon. I'm never gonna be a pawn in their manipulation games. Oh Lord, I'm taking the reins and breaking the chains. I'm never gonna kneel away. My profit is 7 cents. No preacher or president. Gonna let I used to. We never know. Nothing can die.
Welcome to another episode of the Lords of Consciousness videocast. I'm your host, Clint-culberson, and I'm really excited to be joined today by a guy named Forrest-Stevens out of BC, Canada, Vancouver Island. That's right, Forrest?
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah, man.
Forrest is the director of a documentary that I've recently just found called The Reality of Van Life. And it's on his YouTube channel titled by his name, Forrest-Stevens. That's 2 R's in Forrest. And it has over 300,000 views in 3 months. I mean, this thing is catching on really well. And it's a fantastic view at the reality of van life, the good, the bad, the ugly. And I kind of wanted to get into all 3 of those aspects about van life, and it's your documentary wasn't like shitting on it or anything like that, but it was kind of maybe breaking a little bit of the illusion that the Instagram world has created in terms of it just being this, everything beautiful all the time kind of thing. But it seems like your own channel though has started off by showing the really advantageous parts of van life. Why don't we start this way? Just give us the 101 on what van life is, in case anyone isn't really up to snuff on what the heck we're talking about.
Yeah, I mean, van life is a broad thing, but it's a term for people who live in a van, right? But van life. The van life movie that I made, it's the reality of #van life, and that hashtag's in there purposefully. So it's, I don't claim to know the reality of every single person's van life experience, but what I can do as a documentary filmmaker is take one aspect of it. So I decided to take the aspect of the connection of people living in vans and how they portray that on Instagram. So van life for a lot of people is just simply a search for freedom. They might post to Instagram, they might not, but their intent behind it is to maybe live cheaply, be able to travel, bring their possessions with them while they travel, maybe minimize their possessions, once again, in the search of freedom from those possessions. It's just about exploring, and it tends to be a lot of young people that are getting into it now. And of course, there's the retirees, which in a lot of ways, they're looking for the same thing. They may have had a corporate job or whatever they did their entire life. Now they're retired and they're like, okay, let's hit the road. Let's get that freedom back, enjoy our lives. So it's for the people who want to retire young, retire in their 20s or 30s and hit the road, and people that are retiring later. And then also, that's what I mean is it's so multifaceted. There's lots of people who have a lot of student debt or whatever kind of financial problems, and they move into a van because there's no rent. You have to pay gas and you have to pay maintenance, but you have to pay that anyways if you have a car, right? So, yeah, I mean, that's what van life is, and it's so broad. But to dive a little bit into the documentary you mentioned, I was really trying to focus on is van life over glamorized, because so many people, when you think about, oh, there's all these people living in a van. If you hear that at first, you might think, oh, okay, so they're like on the edge of homelessness, or what's that all about? But now it's actually become such a glamorized, romanticized thing. So it's got that total paradigm shift of now there's people that are spending 20,000 plus on a Westphalia or a Sprinter van, converting it out so it looks Instagram perfect, and then living in it for a couple months, taking as many pictures as they can, maybe getting a model in front of their van or whatever they might do. I've seen some crazy things. And then just kind of banking on that and putting it up on Instagram and getting sponsorships and really cashing in on this trend. So it was fun to make the documentary about that specific subject. And
yeah, it's funny because you go from, I mean, if you remember in the 90s, Chris Farley on SNL had his famous "I live in a van down by the river," right? And I mean, that's always kind of looked at as like, man, you must be a loser if you're living in a van. So we went from that one side of the pendulum to where in the last, I don't know, 10 years, we'll call it, it's started to become acceptable. And then now it's become cool and trendy. And now maybe I feel like your documentary kind of showed the other end of the spectrum where it's, you know, become this unrealistic view of a certain lifestyle. And I mean, it's everything in between. I mean, there really are people who are on one end of the spectrum that are they're living out of a van, not because they even chose it, because they have no other options, right? And there's those types of people and all the way to, like you said, people dropping like, you know, I mean, hundreds of thousands of bucks. And I mean, even we're talking RV life too. Totally. Into really luxury vehicles, traveling to the coolest places there is, you know, taking sexy pics of yourself in the sexy locations. And, you know, it's fascinating to see the both sides of the spectrum and even how it's shifted in our own lifetimes.
And I think that there's a natural trajectory with trends of a lot of different trends. Like, and I was just kind of looking at the trajectory. Like I saw it becoming really, really popular. Mm-hmm. And then I started seeing a couple parody videos come out about van life, a couple like comedy type music videos. So there were people starting to make fun of that. And so I decided to kind of, I see van life sort of peaking in a way. There's always going to be those people that are diehards. They're doing it for the right reasons, the really integral reasons that I mentioned in the beginning of just, you know, freedom, financially, security, all these things. But I see the kind of trend of it eventually going to peak. And I can see that because people are starting to make fun of that and noticing that it's glamorized and all this. So I decided to really focus in on that. Like, there's a really good, I don't know if you watch Nerd Writer on YouTube. You heard of him? He does video essays and he talks about Marvel, for instance. Marvel became huge because they started making all these superhero movies. And then the kind of the downfall of it, or the starting of the downfall, is actually the movie Deadpool, because it's a total parody of what a superhero is. And then the flip side of that is the movie Logan, which is the harsh reality of what a superhero is. So taking that concept, that was actually a big inspiration. I was like, okay, I've seen all like, I see where this is going. I'm going to make the Logan and Deadpool of van life.
Nice. So, I like that. Yeah. And it's funny you say that because, you know, Marvel Stan Lee just passed away. So it's ironic that you even brought that up.
Interesting.
But I can see what you mean by that. I mean, it'll be interesting to see. I mean, has van life peaked? Is it headed towards a peak? And I guess ultimately, you know, it depends on every person's individual situation. And totally. I kind of wanted to talk to you about that and get into some of the like the true advantages of van life and speak to it as truly a path of freedom, actually, and how people are viewing it in that way. You know, like what's the most what's the word I'm looking for? Beneficial way to enter van life, with what mindset, I suppose.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many people interested in it now, but the people that, you know, there's the people that are like genuinely interested in it, there's that underlying feeling. There's a feeling that comes along with van life that is just like, it can be freedom. It can be like wanderlust is a really good way to actually describe it, of just wanting to just hit the road and be totally free. I think if you have kind of any inkling of that feeling, it's definitely worth trying out. And the thing is you might have that feeling and you might go for a backpacking trip, and that might be the way that you fulfill that feeling. You might sail around the world or sail around some islands or whatever. That might be the way that you fulfill that feeling. But it's just about finding the perfect balance of comfort and freedom and ability. And that just really, it's so depends on your ability as a human being to deal with certain circumstances, because van life is difficult. But if you have that inkling to travel, maybe it's easier than backpacking, or vice versa. So finding a way to satisfy those feelings, and van life can be a way to do that.
How much money can people really save? Because, you know, it's you think, okay, well, yeah, I can save on rent or save on a mortgage and so on and so forth, all the expenses that come with either home ownership or renting, and that's significant. But what are some costs maybe that you don't realize are there in this lifestyle?
I think you can save quite a bit. Like, I just interviewed two different women who live in separate vans, and they're both parked in the same driveway here in Victoria, and they were paying about $700 to rent a room each at one point. And so the one woman's inspiration was actually her friend bought a van and saved so much money that he was able to put a down payment on a piece of land. And so she had a similar dream. So she, you know, made this really big investment. In my eyes, she paid $20,000 for a fully kitted out Sprinter van. You know, I just bought a van a week ago for $800. So, you know, you can pick and choose the way you want to enter it. But for her, she was thinking, okay, this is $20,000. I just paid 14,000. So I say 18,000 or 20,000. She just paid $14,000 in rent. So in a year and a half, she reckons that van's paid back just by living in it. And then in the winter time, so there's different things. Like, if you live in Canada and we live somewhere where it's really expensive to live in Victoria, the housing crisis is really prominent, and so rent is really high. But she had this added expense that some people don't think about, which is in the wintertime here, it's really cold, and she decided to park in this driveway and pay $250 a month. So she's still paying rent of sort, but it's just to heat her little Sprinter van home. And then the other expense people might not see, I mean, people might be listening to this and saying, just drive south, drive where it's warm. Well, then you're driving and you're paying for a ton of gas to get to those warmer locations. And then you're most likely going to drive back. So you're factoring a couple $1,000s of gas for that trip just to stay warm in the winter. And like I said, it's all depending on where you live. This is just the circumstance here in Canada, because there's nowhere really warm in the winter.
Right.
Yeah.
What percentage of van lifers that are, you know, people doing this are traveling all around, and what percentage that you've seen tend to remain local, have jobs? Maybe you wouldn't even have any idea they're living in a van. They're living like a rather routine life, but they just don't have a house that they go back home to.
Yeah, that's a really hard thing to know, like a really good percentage, because the people that I commonly meet and actually go and film my videos with are people that live here because they're established enough to find me, or I'm established, or for me to find them. And so people that are traveling through will often not see my ads online or know that I live here in Victoria and want to meet up. Definitely, I do get people traveling through, but it's more than half people that are living here in Victoria, oftentimes really stealth. They just park. They have 4 or 5 different places they park. And in the wintertime, they have propane heaters. And so they're cutting their expenses there. But, you know, wintertime, like, this is something that I keep asking these people now is like, what do you do for the winter? Because that's a really big issue. And a very uncomfortable situation is obviously being cold in your van and being in a small space with no heat. That sucks. So what's the solution to that? Right. What's
the most common solution to that?
The most common solution is, in my eyes, is actually not a very good solution. And that's using a propane heater that is intended actually for outdoor space. So it needs to be really well ventilated. They're commonly the Wave 3 or the Mr. Heater Buddy. And it just hooks to a propane can. and it's a flameless heater. But yeah, like I said, they need to be well vented, and then you definitely need a carbon monoxide detector for those, because you're dealing with potential carbon monoxide poisoning. And then just like, I don't know, like it can't be healthy to be around like even minimal amounts of that, like constantly, right? So to me, that's a bad solution. And the van I bought, I'm going to do that. But another reason that's a bad solution is because it's a wet heat, and I live in the Pacific Northwest. Mm-hmm. So everyone around here, they're using wet heat. So they're never drying out their van entirely. It can get moldy, cause issues with breathing, all these sorts of things. So I'm going to have that as a stealth way. And then I'm also putting a wood stove inside my van, which I think is one of the better ways to do it. It's a dry heat. So
how do you ventilate that?
Yeah. So I'm actually what I bought is I bought a minivan. So my idea is to turn it into the complete stealth camper van, which seems kind of funny because I'm going to have a wood stove in it, right? So the wood stove, the chimney is actually only going to come out about this high out of the top, mm-hmm. and be mostly hidden by the roof racks. So the chimney is actually going to be venting it out. Oh. And then it'll have a cap on it that you either remove right before you light it, or you lift up and there's vents through the cap on the side. Mm-hmm. So the smoke can go right out.
So talk about this desire to be stealth in terms of one of the issues that a lot of people that embark in this lifestyle have is a place to actually park your van, you know, and maybe you don't have time to drive out to the boondocks and to some public land areas, but you know, maybe you have a job and you want to stay close. What are some of the difficulties that people find in terms of just finding a place where they can actually park without getting a lot of issues from police or property owners or whatever?
Yeah, so actually the whole idea about living in a stealth camper van is actually a little bit controversial when you get into the van life community, because there's a lot of people that think that there's absolutely no reason to be stealth. And in fact, trying to be stealth will actually draw more attention to you. And their idea is that essentially you look like you're trying to sneak around. If someone sees you go in there and you disappear and you're all blacked out, it's a little bit suspicious. So a lot of people think it's fine, just get a camper van, an RV, whatever, park it in industrial areas where there's 24-hour parking, and people know you're staying there, but you move around enough. And if somebody comes by, you just say, oh yeah, I'm living here, but you know, this is why I'm living here, and I thought it was okay to park here. And if it's not, I'll move on. So I think the best solution actually is to get into whatever lifestyle, whatever part of van life you want. If you think about stealth, if you don't, it doesn't matter. What the best thing to do is actually be respectful and kind of become a little bit part of the community. You know, if somebody notices you and getting out of a camper van, and they think, I wonder if that person's staying here. And so they're peeping out of their window of their house or whatever, looking at you, and they see that you actually pick up some garbage off the ground, or you say hi to somebody and you wave and you're friendly. They're a lot less likely to actually care. So it's really about immersing yourself and being part and really being just a good neighbor of wherever you are. I think that's probably the best way. I'm personally making my van stealth, just to showcase what a minivan can, like the potential of a minivan and how it can be. I don't necessarily think it's necessary, but I just want to for the fun of the build. Yeah. It's
an option. So what are right now? I mean, what are the most common options for people in terms of location to park overnight?
Yeah, I mentioned industrial areas because those are typically the areas where you won't get bothered at all in cities. It's very unlikely that you will get bothered because other people in their camper vans will already be in those areas. In Vancouver, there's these industrial roads right by the Home Depot and under the SkyTrain, and there's dozens and dozens of converted vans and buses and motorhomes and everything. And they're just, nobody bothers them because everyone knows they're there, and you know, there's no need to be stealth. It's part of the living situation in Vancouver. So that's a really good area. But, you know, having the stealth minivan, I could park anywhere. I could park on residential streets. I could park wherever. Here in Victoria, there's a big park called Beacon Hill Park. And then in front of there is the ocean. And there's in between there, there's a kind of a loop road called Dallas Road. And a lot of people will just park there overnight and then leave at 8 a.m. So the bylaw office here doesn't open until 8 a.m. And some van lifers have actually talked to the bylaw officers, and they say, if we ever get a call, we're not going to come down and investigate until after 8 a.m. So if you just leave by 8 a.m. from wherever you're parked and go to a public parking area, so that's like a parking lot or a meter or just a 2-hour parking sign or whatever, there's no reason for us to bother you. So they know about the situation, and that's probably the best thing I would recommend. Like I can say industrial areas, residential if you're stealth, all these things, but the best idea is to actually reach out to the local van life community, because there will be one in almost every single town now, and ask them what they do, you know, where are the spots in the town. That's what I would recommend.
You know, when you do, you know, I know there's no way to know exactly, but when you put together all the people you've ever seen doing this lifestyle, what percentage of them are kind of doing their own thing, that they park alone, it's much more of a solitary life? And what percentage of them are kind of, you know, meeting up at night with these, you know, caravan communities kind of thing?
There's a big percentage that are really into meeting up, and you know, for instance, one of them actually has a big motorhome, and they all go inside the motorhome because they can all stand up and cook, and you know, it's really big community feel, and it's really nice. And there's probably about 10 different van motorhome dwellers in Victoria doing that, and possibly like 10 or so other being a lot more solitary, occasionally going there and knowing those people, but they haven't. Yeah, not every day, every once in a while. That's probably roughly what I would say.
It's awesome. It's awesome. I mean, I mean, we're all about community with this media site that we're doing, and cool. It's funny how just the different ways communities can come together, you know, maybe under an underpass on some weird industrial area, a bunch of cool people are hanging out and living free, man. And I dig it. I think it's fantastic.
You know, there is that other side too, where there can be people who really, really want to be secluded. They're in this life because they don't feel like they fit into any society. Like, you know, I've noticed people that like this one time I had my camera out, didn't point it at this guy's van at all, but I knew that there was this guy living in a van. He opened his door and said, "Do not point that camera at me." And I was like, well, okay, well, I didn't, but thanks for letting me know. And that was just like, you know, he was just living his life, wanted to be private. I don't really know his reasons. You know, I never got to talk to him because he was very standoffish about
He probably had a warrant out for his arrest, bro.
Yeah, maybe. Who knows, you know? But I think there is a sect of vehicle dwellers, as well as a sect of any kind of people that just want to be alone a little bit more.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, let's talk about safety and what you've heard. What's the feedback you've gotten? I mean, a lot of the videos that even you do are single females or two females together or whatever that are out doing their thing. What are the risks? And because a lot of people would, I think, on the surface who've never done this would feel really scared. You know, oh my gosh, how could you do that? You'll get mugged, killed. You know, everyone's parents probably are freaking out when their young 20-year-old decides to live this lifestyle. I mean, what do you have to say about that from what you've seen? And obviously it totally depends on the city you live in and so on and so forth. But even in your microcosm of the Pacific Northwest, what have you seen?
Yeah, you know, security isn't as much of an issue as a lot of people that comment on my videos think it is. You know, a lot of people are like, you better have a gun with you, all this kind of stuff. This is, you know, I live in Canada. Most people don't concern themselves with having a gun at all, even in their house or whatever, you know. So maybe a hunting rifle or something like that if they live in the sticks, but that's about it. And, I think in one respect, living in a van, because there are certain people who would potentially be homeless if they didn't live in a van. And so having a van means they have locked doors. So there's a security there. And then I think, I can't even really think if I've noticed people have like mace or pepper spray or like a bat. I can't say I have noticed that at all.
Do you have you heard of any incidences happening with people? More just theft and things like that?
Yeah. So the only time, I know one guy who said that he heard some people outside of his van. He was in there and they started saying, "Oh, let's see if this van is open." And they were just like two teenagers, and he suspected they were just going to try. And they tried to open his door, and then he just opened the door and said, "Get the hell out of here!" And they just scurried away. Right. So they didn't know anybody was in there because he has like a really, really stealth van. But I think I think really the biggest threat is theft, more so than human endangerment.
Right.
I think van life is still not well known enough in the mainstream that a lot of people won't suspect that somebody's in there. So they're just looking around for stuff if they're going and breaking into cars or whatever. Mm-hmm. So they might not even necessarily think that someone's living there. It might be different if I asked in a different city, right? There might be more, like even in Vancouver, I'm sure there's more issues than here in Victoria.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So a lot of people, I think, look at van life and think this is so cool, but they feel like they can't do it themselves, kind of thing. And part of your documentary you brought up is that, hey man, it is a little harder than you think sometimes. It's not all about the glitz and glamour, but there is a difficult element of it. But can people overthink that, that initial entry into this world? Is it easier than maybe some think? And they can do it, kind of thing. Like you said, you just bought a van for $800. That's not like an insane amount of money.
No, not at all. Yeah, it's nothing for a lot of people. And I think one of the things that a lot of people that I talk to that live in van life recommend to other people, because one of the questions I always ask them in these weekly videos I do with people is, would you recommend this to people? And what type of people would you recommend it to? And of course, the type is somebody wanting freedom, already thinking about it, adventurous, these kind of things. But a lot of times people will recommend trying it out in some form. So renting a van or a motorhome and going for a weekend or a week and seeing how you like it. Other people have said, like, before buying a van, just mark off in tape, an 8 by 10 foot place in their living room and see if they can live inside that space. And, I think
that's pretty interesting.
I think a lot of people kind of overthink it in a way where they think, okay, I have to like live in this van, but that's not really the case. You're living out of the van in a lot of ways. Like, you're sleeping in the van, you're maybe cooking in the van. But, people put bathrooms and showers and all this kind of stuff when there's facilities everywhere. You get a $20 a month gym membership. You can have a shower whenever you want. Mm-hmm. Public washrooms are everywhere. Those aren't things that I personally care about. Other people have different opinions and different wants and needs. But I think a lot of people jam a little bit too much into their expectations of van life. And I think van life is really perfect for people that don't care about that. If you mention like, oh, you won't have a bathroom, and they don't question it, they don't care about that, then it's probably right for them, and they should probably try it out at least.
Yeah. Talk about cleanliness. What are the options for personal hygiene, and even talking about your dishes and your plates and all of your accessories that need to keep clean? What are the best solutions that people have out there, from in vehicle solutions to like you who have maybe has a minivan? You're not going to fit a shower in there, but what are the options for people that are going the smaller vehicle route?
Yeah. A lot of people are interested in van life because of sustainability as well. And you might not be as sustainable as you think you are, in the sense where you have to rely on other facilities when you're in a van. I've got a friend who built a shower inside of his van with pressurized tubes and things like that, but it's really small, it's really compact, and he only uses it once in a while. I think a lot of people will resort to fewer showers and also more baby wipes. So that's a big thing. And then like I said, the gym memberships, also maybe the truck stops if you're traveling a lot and you don't, gym memberships work if you get an Anytime Fitness or 24-hour fitness or something like that, and where those are and they're around you or whatever. But kind of picking up and going where you can. Like I know this one guy who he has a shower and he's got a bigger motorhome thing, but he chooses to find natural sources because that's what he's into. So he actually goes into waterfalls and rivers, and those are his showers, and that's the way he keeps clean. And that's obviously not doable for everyone. So that's, it's such a wide range, and people get super creative with what they do to shower and keep clean. And then dishes, people get really creative with that too, because doing dishes is a big pain in a house, but it's even worse when you have a tiny sink or no sink or a bucket or, whatever. So, I had creative ways where I dealt with dishes. So I would only ever use steel wool, and I would actually have a pump with a 5-gallon jug. And so that would reduce the amount of water, because steel wool can scrub everything, reduce the amount of soap and reduce the amount of water that you have to use because you're having to go and filling up water and all these things. So that was my solution. A lot of people go further than that, even in reducing the amount of water consumption, and they use alcohol, and they wipe out all the food that's in their dishes and then spray it with alcohol and re-wipe it, or vinegar or something like that. For me, that doesn't seem sanitary enough. I still like to use soap and water because that kills all the bacteria, all that stuff. Mm-hmm. I've had food poisoning and it sucks. So, but yeah, people, it's once again, it's on your own comfort level and your own creativity, I guess, in some ways for that sort of stuff.
Yeah. Van life for someone who's a single person, it seems obvious the benefits, but there are families out there doing this, and maybe some of them have bigger vehicles, maybe, converted buses, whatever, mobile living in general. Can you speak to the potential for even families to consider this option? Especially, I know, like me and my wife, we want to buy land one day, and sometimes that's difficult to save up for when you're forking over huge chunks of change for rent and so on and so forth. And so we even us, we've considered mobile living as like a temporary option. Like, hey man, let's do this for 2 years, stack cash, we'll live, it'll be uncomfortable on some level, but it'll be fun too. And can you speak to that in terms of a potential for even families?
Yeah. Personally, I can't really relate it. I can relate it a little bit. So one of my goals actually is to get to either to build a tiny home or build out a bus, me and my partner to live in it and buy some land and park it on there and live out of it on land while we build some outbuildings. So that's kind of, once again, like very similar to what you and your wife were wanting to do potentially or whatever. But people, like I've interviewed a couple people that are like families. The most recent one was this couple, and they had a 3-year-old son and they had a motorhome. So it was a bigger van, and they actually converted the top part. So it was a Class C motorhome with the top cab bit that has like usually a bed, and they converted that into a kid's bed on one side and a playroom on the other. So, and their big reason was when their kid was 2, they were backpacking through Asia, and they were doing the Airbnb kind of trip and travel. So they found they really wanted to keep traveling because they're that kind of people and that kind of family. But their reason to get into van life, one of their biggest reasons was because they wanted to provide some sense of stability for their son. And that stability was having his own area in the motorhome. So most people would think, going from whatever their traditional lifestyle is into a motorhome would be very unstable. But for this couple and this family, it was more stability than they were used to. So that's another kind of relative perspective thing. But just to kind of get back to like families living in vans, I think it's much more difficult than just a single person or a couple. Like another family I met, they moved out of their van because she was pregnant, and they wanted to kind of like build a crib and live in their Sprinter van with their newborn, but they decided to buy a condo instead and live in that as kind of to make it easier for them. So I think it's difficult, and I think a lot of people do it, but I think more and more than that, you'll see people in tiny homes, like families in tiny homes. That's kind of more usual than families in vans. It does happen, but it's less common.
Yeah, I mean, maybe speak to the tiny home movement, the van life movement, all of these kind of new ways of living as potentially like a result of a disillusion, I would say, that of a pretty big portion of the collective of, let's just say North America right now, who are just they no longer see the value in this like crazy rat race capitalistic world where it's just go, go, go. It's like working long hours for what? To just get more toys or whatever it be, or to be just riddled with debt. And, speak to like that whole evolution that's taken place over the last, 10 years. And maybe a lot of it's happened since the 2008 financial situation that happened, hit most of the world, really.
Yeah. I think a lot of people are feeling the squeeze. There's, like you said, I mean, I think subconsciously a lot of people understand, but maybe consciously it's not put in perspective enough how big the gap has gotten. Inflation, like if you look back at wages percentage, like compared, with inflation, with housing costs, with food costs, all these different things, it was very common for young families to be able to afford a home and to raise a child or two. But now more and more, that's a really something that people have to be very aware of. Like, people don't just have kids anymore without really thinking about, can they afford it? Because whereas before it was just a given that you're going to have a family if you get married and all this, and a home, and debt is on the rise. I think
well, it's almost impossible for like one person to be the sole breadwinner. It takes like two parents anymore to even be able to afford it.
Yeah, exactly. Just the fact that the majority of families, there was only one person working in the 50s or 40s or whatever it was, is crazy now. Every family, there's always two people working usually. So yeah, I mean, and then like you said, you still want those. I still want that security of having a home base, but I can't afford it yet. So, and I'm not alone there. So there's other people thinking about what's an alternative. How can I save money? How can I cut back? How can I make my money worth more? Because your money is worth more if you are able to pay less every single month. If you're able to cut down your monthly expenses, if anybody understands like a simple expenses and assets spreadsheet, right? Your liabilities and your expenses, you can really understand how you can be create a lot more wealth if you're able to cut down on expenses. And that's a huge part of all of these movements, all these alternative societal movements, is because a lot of people are understanding that the problems with society, they're not going to be able to fix them as individuals. So they have to fix what they can, and that's their personal living situation and their personal expense situation and their personal finance in a lot of ways. So that's what they're doing. That's, you know, instead of buying a home, they're building a tiny home for $40,000 instead of $400,000. They're renting land, then they're eventually able to buy land. You know, that's a step-by-step kind of way of doing something that used to be very obtainable. Mm-hmm. It's just more compact. It's a different way to do it. It's the same with the van. You know, we touched briefly on it. You thought about buying something with your family to save money for 2 years and then be able to buy that land you want. It's these are the kind of things that we have to do as people in this world now to get ahead.
Yep.
Yeah.
I'm a big fan of Gary Vaynerchuk, and he's such a guru for the millennials, if you will. And I'm a big fan also of Tony Robbins, his good buddy, and they talk a lot about just taking massive action in your life. Like, if you want it, you got to get real serious about it. You got to do the math. You got to know exactly what it's going to take, and then take massive action to do it. And I think for anyone listening who may have been tossing around these ideas, to really consider it, because I think it's one of those things that it's a real option for financial freedom in your life. More than just financial freedom, but especially mm-hmm. financial freedom in terms of what we're talking about. And if you one day want land ownership or just want a better life or want more ability to travel or whatever it be, it's just such a great option. And it's like if you're willing to overcome, it seems like one of the big barriers to entry is to overcome like the societal, I don't know, like, oh, you're a loser if you live in a van thing. I mean, I know van life's made it way cooler, but it's still a thing for people to overcome. And, you know, I think that's one of the benefits of the beauty side of Instagram hashtag van life. That is actually, it's one of the positive parts of it. You know, the hot chick on the, you know, in her bikini right by the beach. That actually, you know, you show that to your friends and be like, hey, look, this is actually pretty damn cool. Oh, show me more, you know. But speak to, before we close though, like you've been following this movement for a long time, and speak to, again, we touched on it earlier, but a little bit of that pendulum, how like the glamorizing of van life has served a purpose, but has it kind of gone out of control in some ways, or is it a little out of balance? Is it just playing on our ego side of things and that's it? And there's like an emptiness to it that, you know, like so much in our society that focuses on like external beauty as the be all end all. I mean, how much of that do you see in this movement that we have to be a little leery of? And I think through satire, your documentary did a great job of kind of pointing a light on that. And satire is so powerful. Way to go, man. But speak to that, and maybe even like why to this point, what was the inspiration for you to do this documentary?
Yeah, I mean, I think that is a good question. I mean, there was a lot to unpack there. Actually, you mentioned the beginning there about how the stigmatism behind living in a van, and I think a lot of people still deal with that. I think I talked to one guy who's a very alternative kind of guy. You know, he's just like a traveler and busker. And he said the hardest thing for him to overcome was the way that he would get looked at when he would be parked in a parking lot. He would hop out with his water jugs and have to go fill them up in like a public water fountain, right? And so that was something for him to get over, is that stigmatism. For me personally, I bought a minivan to travel across the country 3 or 4 years ago now. And I didn't know about van life, and I made a big Facebook status about buying a minivan because I thought it was awesome. I didn't know like people did this all the time. I was like, yeah, let's camp in this thing for 3 weeks along the mountains and stuff. And so for me, it's always been something that I've always enjoyed, kind of being an outsider and being different. So I don't mind those looks. And then, yeah, to speak on your point of the glamorizing, and I think you're right. I think there is positives and negatives to it. And depending on one's perspective, obviously you can have different opinions about what's good and bad. Those are totally subjective things. But I think that what I was trying to do with the van life movie was be very realistic. Mm-hmm. And I did it through satire, like you said, and there's some funny bits in there that are totally ridiculous. But I really wanted to show and kind of convey that these people that are looking on Instagram, if you're scrolling through and all you're seeing is Westphalia, and you're not seeing when they're broken down, or there's, you know, the picture of the van life movie documentary thing is a Westphalia with smoke and fire coming out of the back, because that is a big reality, is you're going to have mechanical problems along the way, which is part of it. And I'm not saying that's the only part of it. There's everything. There is those beautiful sunsets, having your trunk popped or your back doors open, laying there and just thinking, wow, this is awesome. I would have been in an office right now working and typing on a computer. So, and you see that side, you really see that side with those glamorized pictures. You see the ocean, you see the beautiful parts of your country. And I think you're right. I think there's more people that are looking at that. You know, there still so many people in the comment section or whatever, because that's kind of how I get a general consensus. You know, a lot of people still post, you know, you live down or you live in a van down by the river, right? They're still saying that Chris Farley SNL skit. And that's their reference point. But I think more and more people are getting a new reference point. Maybe they've never even seen that sketch. It was back in the 90s or whatever, right? So maybe what their introduction to van life is whatever one of the popular van lifers are on Instagram, and they're seeing all this. And then I'm hoping that maybe they'll see another side of it. There's lots of van dwellers who show everything, but it doesn't work as well on Instagram's algorithm. You know, it doesn't work as well on YouTube's algorithm as the super glamorized, beautiful stuff that you can share to your friends. And wow, this is so cool. Or this chick in this van are awesome, you know? So it's, you know, just, it's good to show both sides. That's what I was trying to do. And I think there's a positive to the over glamorization, because less stigma towards it, more people looking into it. And I think the more people look into alternative things, the better, because, you know, van life might lead them to tiny home life, which might lead them to homesteading or permaculture, or, you know, something like a more sustainable way of life. And even though, you know, if you get into van life, even though you're burning gas, your footprint, your carbon footprint and your ecological footprint locally is much smaller than living in a home where all your waste is being flushed out and you're able to consume whatever and just throw your garbage in a can and it's picked up. When you're in a van, what you consume is around you and you have to deal with it. And so you decide to spend less on food that's packaged. You know, you automatically will fall into things that produce less waste. You know, you're more resourceful with your water when you do your dishes. It's really simple things. It's out of necessity that you become more ecological. Even if that's not a goal of yours, you do become more ecologically friendly by living in a van. So I think the more people that get into it, the better. Some will stick to it. Others will sell their van, go back to their life and think of that as a little blip in their life, in a good way or a bad way, whatever. So the more the merrier, in my opinion.
Beautiful. Yeah, you know, one of the issues that I constantly am bringing up is just this dependency that humanity has on the economy, and how this economic security that the big brother is giving us is like, it has us all by the balls in so many ways, and especially those who are true materialists. I mean, once they have you hooked on materialism, it's just too easy to just, you know, just swing you around, you know. The economy busts and you lose your life savings and you freak out and people are jumping out of windows in these situations. And one of the things that I find about the minimalism movement in general is just, it's you are lessening your dependency on this system that Well, it's a Babylonian system that is coming down, if you ask me. I mean, I think we're living at the end of the fall of an empire in some ways. I think from the ashes will rise something super beautiful. You know, the phoenix will rise again, kind of thing. Like I don't sit and overly worry about, you know, am I going to make it if the economy collapses? I'll be okay. But I think a lot of people really do worry about that stuff and feel like some sort of existential crisis because they are so dependent on this system. And so, you know, they think they can't live without their 2,500 square foot home or, you know, without cable television or without whatever, you name it. All the things that this like society of convenience has given us. And it's great to see people, a movement of people who are learning to live with less and really showing how happy they are in many ways. Like, and again, not to say that it's just pure bliss 100% of the time. Of course it isn't. But
nothing is.
Yeah, of course. No, there's just, it doesn't matter what path you go down. I mean, even homesteading sounds so magical, but it's like, get ready to get your ass kicked. I mean, get ready. And I that's one of my goals is to do our own homesteading. And I realize it's not going to be easy. That's for sure. It'll be a lifetime of hard work. But the idea of really minimizing my dependency on this system is like really a huge key in my life. And one of the reasons I wanted to have you on is because I find the van life movement is just a glorious option for those who want to minimize that and to gain their own freedom, financial freedom, personal freedom, spiritual freedom, physical freedom. The ability to just go where you want to go is just so awesome, especially for certain people at certain times in their life. I think for young people especially, obviously, it's just such a good option to, you know, people come out of high school and feel like they got to go right to university and figure out which degree they were going to pick and what, you know, have their career chosen by the time they're 21 is fucking ludicrous. Forgive my language, but it's ludicrous. Totally. And I think van life's one of those, you don't have to do van life, but it's an option in terms of, hey, go out, find yourself, just explore the world. Just go be an explorer. Go, you know, because when you get out of high school, it's like you leave your mom and dad's nest or whatever, you know, this whole reality of, you know, paying the bills can smack you in the face big time. And it's a real reality check. And not to say that there aren't bills in van life, but again, if you can maybe transition in a better way, I just think there's just so many benefits to it. And, yeah, man, it's fantastic. I'm really curious to see the solutions that will come out of this movement in terms of, like, right now, the idea of people parking in Walmart parking lots and industrial areas and all this shit. I wonder what solutions are going to come from it. I mean, are there going to be kind of those, you know, somebody buys a big piece of land and it's for people to come park and do their thing, almost like RV parks, but for van lifers, more temporary, more short term, whatever. I don't know. It seems like from this that there's always innovative people that are going to come up with solutions to make this movement better, make it more, you know, I don't know. You said it might be peaking. I don't know. Who knows? We'll see. We're going to find out, dude.
Yeah, no, I can't predict the future. I just saw a couple little spikes in the trend where I thought, okay, people are starting to make fun of it. Right. But I think you touched on so many good points there. But one of the things is like, what is going to be a solution for people parking? And I told you I bought this minivan. One of my ideas is to build it out and then start, you know, I've got this YouTube channel where essentially if I build this out and make a video about building it out and it's fairly successful, it can actually fund me buying minivans, building them out and giving them to responsible homeless people. And so I could actually, my idea is to potentially work with the local community and the government here and start saying like, this is one of the many needed solutions. This is one part of it to help the homeless situation here. Because we got a really bad homeless situation in Victoria and Vancouver, because it's the only temperate place in Canada for Canadian homeless people. So my idea is to build out this van, allow that person or whoever to live in it temporarily while we build out another van for them and give it to them. And then work with the government to say, now here's a safe place where you can park. So this is one of the solutions to
That's
homeless.
beautiful, man. The mayor of Salt Lake City, Utah, did a tiny home project and put homeless people in it. It was like really successful, and it had a lot of good benefits, and it ended up saving the government tons of money in terms of the benefits paid out towards everything involved with homeless people and everything that goes with it. Okay, from services to crime to the whole thing. And I think that's a great idea, man. Plus, it also potentially gives them wheels to get to a job.
Yeah,
and that's pretty awesome, man. I mean, we live especially if you live in the West Coast, anywhere, it's big, and it's these cities are spread apart in many ways, and sometimes it's hard to depend on public transport. I mean, probably where you live is better than where I live, but I know a lot of Western cities just don't have that infrastructure built up, and it's hard to get to work, man. Yeah.
No, it solves a lot of issues that people without homes have. It's somewhere to lock your possessions safely. It's transportation. It's it hits a lot of pain points, I think.
Yeah, it's beautiful, man.
Yeah.
What projects do you have moving forward, my friend?
Yeah, my big project, well, I've got a bunch of projects actually, but my big project right now is that minivan, converting it out. I just accumulating some more supplies. I'll be building it out. I'm going to be doing a direct parody of Pimp My Ride called Convert My Minivan. I'm going to put a PS2 in there, everything that they did with,
Nice.
Yeah. And then I'm going to have it as the functional stealth camper van and a prototype for this solution for homelessness, the homeless problem. And then on top of that, I went hitchhiking in August around the Canadian Rockies and back. It was a 2-week trip, and I'm still editing videos from that. And the whole idea is to showcase how cheap one can travel. So I hitchhiked for 2 weeks, and it cost me about $120. So 2 weeks of traveling and seeing a national park and all these beautiful places, $120. Show that it's accessible, and travel can mean anything. So that's kind of the two major projects. Yeah.
I love how you are just breaking down those, like you said, the stigmatism behind some of these things where, hitchhiking, trust me, if you're over 20, 30 years old, people are going, that's dangerous. You'll get murdered. You'll get killed. I mean, I can already hear my mom, and I can hear my mom, what she would say if I told her I was going hitchhiking across the country kind of thing, and across the long distances. I love it, man. And you know what it shows me when I heard about your hitchhiking thing? It's like, man, the vast majority of people are good human beings. Okay, I mean, I know the news tries to portray it as like, we're all a bunch of demons, and you better get your guns, like you were saying, and you better be scared of your fellow man. But it's such a small percentage of people that you really need to be cautious of. I mean, most people are good-hearted people, and who are happy to give you a helping hand if you need it. And hey, I'm going this way. Hop in, dude. It's no big deal. Have a cool conversation with someone, and I think it's just awesome what you're doing. I love your videos. I hope people check it out. That's Forrest, 2 R's, Stevens on YouTube. And check out his new documentary called The Reality of #Van Life, which it'll make you laugh, but it's also quite informative, showing all sides of van life. If you're looking into doing it, it would be a good one to check out, because again, it shows kind of the good, the bad, and the ugly. But ultimately, you show a lot of videos of people that are doing this as a lifestyle, and you're interviewing them and showing, kind of getting in on what brought them to their decision to living like this, and what freedoms that they have from it, or what their goals are. And so for anyone out there who's like looking for an out of this, the debt slavery, you live in one of those, if you live on anywhere near the Pacific Ocean, you probably, if you're young, you probably can't afford to even live there anymore. You're getting priced out by these endless growth economies and things like that. You know, this is such a cool option, and I think your channel, and there are so many out there, but you have a really great, you ask great questions, and you're funny dude, man. And we didn't get to showcase your comedic element of your personality, but you're a funny dude, man. And you have a great way of looking at it. So thanks, Forrest, for coming on.
I really appreciate it, Clint. Thanks for having me. Yeah, it's great dude. I love your podcast. So
thanks, man.
Yeah.
Cool. We'll do it again sometime in the future.
Dude, yeah, anytime.
Excellent.
Cool, dude.